Everybody, welcome back once again to another episode of The Art of Photography. My name is Ted Forbes, and today we are starting part one on a mini-series of videos that I want to do on compositional techniques, something we've been talking about for a while in the most recent episodes. And the way it's going to work is like this. Each video that we're going to do, we're going to pick, kind of isolate one little area of technique to talk about in terms of visual composition. I'm going to talk about it, give some theories behind it, and then what we're going to do is look at some images, see how it's applied, and at the end I'll give you a little kind of mini assignment to do so that, it's in a class, I'm not grading you or anything, but if you want to share your images online, you might consider the Flickr group, and we can start some threads in there on stuff, and you can post your images and get feedback and continue the discussion. That tends to work pretty well for that. But today, in this first video, we're going to talk about line and composition. Now, lines by nature, they kind of don't really exist. And if you think about it like this, if you photograph something that is linear or that is a line, let's say it's a telephone wire, depending on your focal length, how far you've zoomed in, how close you are, that line really starts to become a shape. Okay, so really lines, how thick does a line have to be before it does become a shape? So lines are really invisible. So by the nature of them, they really don't exist. However, in visual composition, they definitely exist because they can be implied, they can create and define shapes, they can most effectively guide the viewer's eye to an area of the composition that you want to bring emphasis on. And like I said, we're going to look at some examples of this in a second. So sometimes you might see what are defined as lines, and this could be like we talked about telephone wires, or if you were to shoot a flagpole, you have the pole, you might have a cord coming off the flag. Those are lines that are defined. And lines can be, I kind of think about these in several different categories. Now, if you're an artist visually, I mean a painter, or you draw, or something that's not taking pictures, line is treated a lot differently when you're learning that aspect of it, because a painting or a drawing is completely dependent on the skill that's developed by the person who's creating that image. You're literally creating everything in the image. Photography is just as difficult to deal with some of these things, but it's much different because instead of creating the line, you're trying to find that line in your composition. Or maybe a series of lines, it may be lines that define shapes. And so those are the things to start thinking about when you're making photographs, and they're going to change how you take that photograph and how you perceive the image that you're trying to create. So for instance, you might require a different focal length on your lens. You might require getting in closer, pulling back away. You might require changing your point of view and getting things to line up differently. So those are really strong things to consider when you're basically making a picture, whether it be hand skills or, in our case, using a camera to do it. It's just a different way of getting the same result. And it's equally challenging because I think the tendency a lot of us have to do, particularly if you're doing more like street photography, documentary kinds of things, is that you're going to kind of lift up the camera and point and shoot. You want to develop your eye so these things kind of become second nature and you can very quickly make these decisions. But back to what we were saying, there are basically four types of lines that you can have. Lines that go straight up and down in a composition, like buildings in an urban landscape. You might have lines that go horizontally, like a seascape. We're going to look at some of those. Sometimes you have lines that are more organic in nature. They're, especially if you're shooting an organic subject, like a person, or if you're shooting flowers, something like that, food shots. Lines are going to curve and they're going to do different things, and those lines have a different effect. And then there's also the implied line. And let's look at those in order just a little bit. Like for instance, vertical lines and horizontal lines, they tend to create the most order in a composition. They're going to get everything very symmetrical, very even. Lines that go up and down, vertical lines, tend to indicate solidity, power, uprising, that kind of nature. And so, for instance, shooting buildings downtown, it has a very strong impact when you see those kinds of visual lines. Lines that are horizontal in nature tend to be a little more calming, but still have that support, that definition, that foundation. Diagonal lines, on the other hand, start to create a little more energy in your composition, and you can use that to great effect, and we're going to look at some of that in a second. And so these are ways to kind of think about, do things need to be straight? Do they need to be at an angle? Do they need to tilt? And then you get into things like organic lines that really start to have organic type effects to them. They can be calming. They can create a lot of tension. They can create chaos. They can create order sometimes. But they have a completely different feel. So all this depends on what it is that you're trying to capture. And then there's the last type of category that I think is the most interesting, where lines are literally implied in composition. And a lot of times these can happen, especially if you're shooting people. Generally, the direction your subject is looking. If I look over to my left, I could perhaps create kind of a visual tension, particularly if I'm gesturing with my hands. So things like gesture, things like eye contact, those are going to create directional lines that probably don't exist. There may be white space or blank space in your composition, but they lead the viewer's eye a certain direction. And there's many great examples of this, and we'll look at some. Henri Cartier-Bresson was extremely good at this in defining gesture, defining emotion, defining what the subject is looking at. You can see a lot that starts to come into play there. And I'll link to everything in the show notes, but you might take a look at some of those earlier episodes too. And they kind of start to define shapes even that are all implied. They're not actually there in the composition. So I don't want to get too heady on you, but what we're going to do is let's go over to the computer and take a look. One other thing I want to mention is because we're going to do a bunch of little mini-series episodes on composition. I thought this would be really cool. We're going to keep a blog. We're actually going to do a little micro website that'll have all this information on it. And I will give you that URL, but let's head over to the computer and have a look. What I want to do in this episode is I want to look at some images, and these are some famous classic images, and I want to talk about the treatment of line, how it's being used, and if you go check out the blog site, you're going to see all this stuff on there. So anyway, basically, this is a very well-known image by Joe Rosenthal, taken at the end of World War II, and it's some American troops putting up a flag, and this is a very well-known image, and you can see that the implied line here is the flagpole itself. And you could even make the argument that there's some gesture in the way the flag is blowing in the wind. And this really is a beautiful photo. It's a very classic shot. And it means a lot to a lot of people. And what's interesting, though, is the use of a diagonal line here, creating a sense of dynamic, a sense of moving forward. This image would look completely different if it were already raised, the flag that is, or on the ground. So horizontal vertical would not have the same impact as the diagonal nature of this line. If you contrast that with, let's look at another image. This is, I've shown these before. This is another Sugimoto image, one of his seascapes that he's explored very heavily in his career. And there's an implied line right there on the horizon. And notice it is a horizontal line. And so this indicates a type of calmness, a type of tranquility. It divides the image perfectly in the middle. This is minimalism at its finest, and it gives you a sense of symmetry, but that line is implied by the horizon. It has a much different feel to it, being in that situation. And you'll notice that a lot of these images, there are more things that contribute to the overall mood than just the line, but these do have prominent lines. This is a seascape by Tom Burrell, which is exactly a completely different feel than the Hiroshi Sugimoto photo that we just looked at. His seascape, he does have a horizon line, but he also shows the beach with the surf coming up. This is a beautiful pinhole image that he shot probably in the 90s, I think. Tom Burrell is an amazing photographer. But notice that this line that is created, the horizon line seems straight, but you do have the shoreline, and then you have this surf coming up, which is very organic in nature. The line has an organic quality to it. It's not straight. It's not horizontal or diagonal necessarily. It's just this beautiful shape that you end up coming up with down here by the indication of that line. Has a much different feel, much more organic, just completely different than what we were looking at with the Sugimoto. So that's an interesting case where we have two seascapes that look radically different. This is an image that I've showed before on this show. It's one of my favorites. This is just a little trivia here. A friend of mine, or a friend of my parents growing up, was a apprentice of Arnold Newman at one point in his life, and they had a signed copy of this photo in their house, and I remember seeing it, and this was the photo that made me want to take pictures. And I had no idea who Igor Stravinsky was at that time, but there was just something very compelling about this image. Real quickly to go through, this is Igor Stravinsky, the famous composer, and you can tell right off the bat with this beautiful shape of the piano lid. This is sometimes referred to as the B-flat image, but there's some strong lines that come into play here. Obviously, you can make cases for every line in here, but the main ones I want to look at here is there's a vertical line in the back here, which gives you a little bit of symmetry within the photo. It separates the human subject, which is way down in the corner. We'll talk about that later, but that draws attention to something when you put it in the corner of an image in an interesting, subtle way. But it's also more or less on the rule of thirds, which we've talked about on here and we'll get more into later. But this is a horizontal line that, a lot of times the use of horizontal lines can, on some kind of subconscious level, indicate authority, upward motion. There's also two diagonal lines that are implied here that create a great deal of interest. This prop holding up the piano lid, as well as this line on the edge of the piano lid over here that give you your diagonals. And there are other lines that kind of do similar things. things in here. You could make the argument that the lines that define the piano lid have an organic quality to them. There's a lot going on in a very simple image here, and I think that's why I like to use this so often as an example of just a really wonderful composition. But anyway, note the use of line, and that's what we're looking at. Moving along, this is a famous image by Charles Schuyler of an industrial complex here. Basically, it's pretty obvious what's being defined. They're really more shapes, but they are implied lines of these, grain elevators that are crisscrossing in this photo, and then the perfectly vertical smokestacks in the background that are shot from the ground, giving them a perspective, more authoritarian, a more upward lifting. There's a lot of dynamics going on. It's not just the verticals of the smokestacks, but these crisscrossing elevators that happen in the middle of the image. So anyway, very interesting stuff, and Schuyler was an amazing photographer and painter as well. Then we'll get into more organic uses of line, and these are obviously, it's an image of an orchid, and this is a Robert Mapplethorpe, and his stuff was absolutely beautiful and elegant and wonderful, but a lot of it, just look at the simplicity of this large leaf that's sticking out of the bowl and how much gesture that ends up giving the image. It divides the composition up diagonally, but not, because it is curving, so you have kind of an organic dynamic quality to it, which I think is extremely interesting. I think you could also echo this into the work of Richard Avedon. This is another image that we've seen before here. The lines that you see in this image, and there are some very beautiful organic lines that are going on, but they're all implied. There's not much that's really indicating this is a line being drawn, but there is a very beautiful curved line that comes up like this that is indicated by the model's left hand going up through the trunk of the elephant, and there's a grace and elegance to that defined by this woman's midsection with her hips and the way this wonderful sash falls down. Richard Avedon actually made a comment, and I believe it was that the sash should have been blowing off to the left to complete that line. I disagree. I think he captured this perfectly. There's also some implied lines in the motion of the elephant's legs and the way they're moving. So again, look for a lot of this grace, a lot of this beauty. These are implied lines. They're not directly in the image, but they are implied by gesture, shape, figure, things of that nature. So anyway, moving along, this is another Sugimoto piece, and this is one of a very different nature, but I just wanted to show you a little bit more depth of how the organic nature and randomness of lines can sort of become. This is a series of work that Sugimoto did. These are abstracts. They're not done with a camera. It's just a piece of photographic paper, I believe, that a static electrical charge has been applied to, which creates literally a image of electricity running across the page. Anyway, but it has a completely different, very organic nature to it. This is almost floral or almost leaf-like or almost like a vein structure, something like that. But this kind of wild, crazy line, it gives off that feeling. It's not the straight up and down or diagonal or even right-left kind of feel to it. A couple more we'll look at real quick. This is another Mapplethorpe. Again, just the elegance and simplicity of basically two lines, one implied by the stem and another implied by this smaller, stem coming off of, the calla lily there. But again, Robert Mapplethorpe, very genius. The last two things I want to show you are some contemporary takes on this, and they're a little bit more conceptual in nature. And this first image is Chris McCaw, and Chris is alive and working today. He's a brilliant photographer, and he has these special cameras that are very large format, larger than 8x10. I don't know how big they are offhand, but they shoot big film. And he does these landscapes, and he basically gets the neutral density down on the lens so far that he can actually capture an exposure that lasts half a day. And that line that you're seeing across, I know the landscape's really dark with those trees down there, but that line is literally where the sun has burnt the negative. So it literally, if you go look him up in Google, and he has interviews where he's talking about sometimes his cameras catch on fire because it's literally creating that much heat. These are the result of when you were a kid, if you ever got a magnifying glass and learned how to burn a hole in a leaf with the sun, it's the same principle, but he's literally burning onto the film. So the implied line is created by the motion of the sun throughout the course of this image. And, this is a pretty serious neutral density attached to this if he's able to get an exposure in broad daylight that is that long. But it has a very interesting effect on it. Again, an organic, graceful quality to it. But when you know what it is, there's almost a violence associated with it as well. But you know, really interesting work, and Chris has done a number of landscapes that are just really interesting like that, I think. And then finally, the last one I want to show you, this is Erwin Wurm, who is an Austrian photographer, and you can see that this is a very comical use of line right here. The name of this image, I believe, is Freudian. I can't remember, but Freudian rectification, that's it. So this is Freudian rectification, and Erwin Wurm, one of the things that he does is a series of what he calls 1-minute sculptures. And so basically he either uses himself or models and then just common everyday objects and tries to create conceptual pose or conceptual sculpture very quickly within 1 minute using these objects, and then photographs it. And I think this is one of my favorites. It's bordering on crass, I realize, but I think one of the things I love so much about it is it's a very simple use of line that has this over-the-top kind of comical quality to it. So anyway, those are some images just to show you some things online, and anyway, they're all found on the blog. So if you go check out compositionstudy.com, and you will find it all there. Okay, so those are some examples of using line in composition, and I will leave you with this today. If you want something to work on, you want something that's kind of a composition exercise, an assignment if you will, create 5 different images, and I'll put all this in the show notes so you can check it out. And this will be a challenge. Do something where you can set something up. So this would be either landscape or studio. You could do a portrait or a series of portraits or multiple people, but don't do something that's like street photography where you're trying to spontaneously capture something. Let yourself slow down to where you can think about it, because what you want is for a lot of this stuff to become second nature, and then when you are shooting more candid situations, these elements are more natural to you. But in the first image, try to create something of interest using vertical lines, so up and down. Try to do one with horizontal lines, that would be the second. Try to do something with diagonal lines, that would be the third. The fourth would be to do something that has organic lines involved, and this could be shooting still lifes of plants, flowers, people, something of that nature. And for the fifth one, and this is kind of the hard one, is what I would do is try to tighten things in and make yourself create a composition that uses implied lines. This is probably the most easiest to do with human subjects, because you have things like I mentioned before with gesture, eye contact, you know, direction, your subject is pointing the light, that can start to create those lines. This is a little harder than it might sound off the top, but anyway, try to do something that creates that visually. It's harder when you don't use people, but maybe you can use objects in some nature. I'm gonna be photographing some of these too, and I'll post my results on the blog as we go, and so make sure you check that out. And once again, everybody, this has been The Art of Photography, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.